Hey folks, David Stewart here. Time for some more Storycraft. Today it is the horror of the werewolf. Yes, we've done zombies, vampires. Now it's time for the oldest of the bunch, werewolves. Werewolves are not just a folkloric monster. They're not just a recent addition to the canon, but werewolves are present going all the way back into antiquity. They are there in classical mythology. The most well-known myth is probably that of Lycaon, who was depending on the source or the tradition, he was an evil king who sacrificed a human to Zeus or attempted to get Zeus to eat a human sacrifice, and Zeus in his anger cursed him by turning him into a wolf. And that's where we get the term lycanthropy from. It's from this character Lycaon. Now, there's actually a lot more to Lycaon's myth than just that. Depending on the source, Zeus also caused a worldwide flood or caused a catastrophic flood in his anger for being trying to be tricked into eating human flesh. But also there was a Greek festival at Mount Lycaeus that existed apparently all the way into the 2nd century AD and may have contained actual human sacrifice. We're not really sure on that, and historians, I think, are not completely clear on it, but certainly there was some very mysterious tradition involving the wolf and Lycaon and this Mount Lycaeus. But as we have gone forward in time 2 millennia, the myth of the werewolf has started to get mixed in with Germanic traditions that involve that. I think especially that of the Berserker, which literally means bear skin, or the idea of a werebear, which is a person or a warrior who can transform himself into a bear at will, a gigantic, maybe a European cave bear, might have animist traditions going all the way back in the midst of time, that they take on the aspects of a bear and able to slaughter their enemies at will. We're not exactly sure what the traditions involving berserkers were, whether they went in unarmored or, that the becoming of a bear was like an animistic thing, like the spirit of a bear descended on them and made them fight like a bear, or if it got mixed up into this belief that somebody literally turned into a bear. But certainly that gets transferred into this idea, or if the berserker was like wearing an animal skin to show what class of warrior he was part of. But as that gets mixed into the tradition of a person being transformed into a wolf as a curse, you end up with the more modern version of the werewolf, which is a person who is afflicted by lycanthropy in most mythologies or in most stories, and the person transforms into a wolf against their will and acts out the animalistic urges of the wolf against their will. And that is really the core of what I think the horror of the vampire is in the modern sense. Now, we also have transfers of that Germanic tradition into modern literature in places that you may not expect. It's actually present in The Hobbit. You have Bjorn, which I think actually just means bear, by the way, and he is a werebear, and Gandalf warns the dwarves and warns Bilbo not to go outside of Bjorn's house at night. And Bilbo may have seen lots of bears gathering, so Bjorn may have been a leader of a group of werebears or berserkers, people who could transform into bears at will. And indeed, he's part of one of the people that I think joins the battle at the end of The Hobbit. So you have this tradition kind of pulled forward into modern literature where we can see it kind of mixed into Tolkien's mythology. But the modern werewolf tale usually involves somebody that gets bitten by a werewolf or otherwise gets afflicted with this werewolf curse. And they don't realize what's happening to them at the beginning, but they start to slowly transform into a werewolf. So the moon rises at night, and it's really easy to see why the moon would be the catalyst for the transformation. If you can imagine our ancestors, nowadays we live in cities, and even if you live in the country, like I live pretty much out in the sticks, you don't hear wolves howling at night. But you can imagine our ancestors, not just here in Europe, but all over the world where the gray wolf has been present, before wolf eradication really knocked the species almost into extinction. Looking up at the moon at night and hearing those wolves howl. Now, if you've never heard wolves, real wolves, howl at the moon, it can be quite chilling, actually. So if you've ever been at Yellowstone Park, for example, at night, there are several packs of gray wolves that have been reintroduced to to Yellowstone, and you can hear them howling, sometimes during the day, but you can hear them at night, and it's quite a frightening sound. Now, I used to camp, and I would hear howling all the time, and that was coyotes. And there's coyotes around here, and they will howl at the moon. It's not quite as scary. It's more like a dog kind of yipping at the moon compared to a real wolf howl. So it's really easy to see how our ancestors would immediately associate that moon with the wolf, because the wolves are howling at the moon. And I don't know what that behavior is really about. Somebody who studies wolves may have a better idea exactly, like if it's part of mating behavior or something like that. But certainly it would be something that would affect our ancestors both in North America and Asia and Europe. So we can see that's what's going to cause the transformation. So the person who's afflicted, the horror of becoming a werewolf is losing control of your human faculties. And depending on the story, you may be permanently transformed into a wolf. And in other cases, you may be a werewolf for a long time, where this transformation happens on certain cycles of the moon, and you have to be locked up in a dungeon, or else you will get free and you'll kill and eat all of the peasants and run amok. So you're a force for evil when you are afflicted with this, and it's something that you would really prefer not to have. You don't want to lose your human faculties. Now, what has kind of happened with, I think, a lot of Gothic literature and stuff more recently, and stuff like, say, Underworld, is the werewolf has been moved out of this area where it's a cursed being, a being that is cursed, and you are afflicted by werewolfism or lycanthropy, and you don't want to be a werewolf, and it's been transferred into something where it's good to be a werewolf, or there are significant benefits, where maybe the werewolf can control his transformation, so he can choose when he wants to take on the aspects of the wolf. And in a lot of cases, it's not really just a wolf. They turn into more like something between a man and a wolf man, and an anamorphic wolf, or more like a werebear. And so you can take on those aspects and be a killing machine and have that power. You find that if you play a game like Skyrim, if you get afflicted by werewolfism, it's like you don't gain stats when you sleep. But it's not that big a deal, because you can, if you're in trouble, you just turn on that werewolf transformation and go nasty and kill everybody as a werewolf. It's quite a bit of fun. So that view of the werewolf, I think, is a little bit more modern. It's moved out of the horror space and into some other kind of space where there's not really something that scary about being a wolf. At the same time, there's also a flip side to lycanthropy that has been explored, which is that it feels good to be the wolf, that you are drawn into that affliction because it feels good to run wild as a wolf and to kill at will and eat and be wild and be in touch with nature. So I think this is especially true with things that are coming out of the 19th century and are things that are looking back at the 19th century. There's a whole bunch of different werewolf movies that are looking back. They're set in the 19th century. They're looking at this romantic view of the wolf, because the wolf, while he is wild and dangerous to man, is in touch with nature. He does the things which are natural. And this is one of the feelings that was present in the romantic movement in art and literature and in music as well, is that there's this nature over there, this savage nature that we've been disconnected from through our industrialized, sterilized world. And I think that holds a lot of weight for people. So the temptation to be pulled into the sinfulness of say vampirism is different for a werewolf. It's not about being pulled into just being sinful. It's about being wild, being free of the human restraints on behavior and morals and understanding, and being something that is completely free and wild and takes joy in killing the animal and eating it, whatever it might happen to be. So the horror kind of involves two different sides. One side is you don't want to be that. You don't want to lose your human faculties. The werewolf itself is very dangerous and could kill you. And then at the other side, becoming the werewolf has a dark temptation to it, which is becoming more wild. And is the person going to give into that temptation? Are they going to resist it and come out clean on the other side? If you ever watch a movie, say like Wolf with Jack Nicholson in it, that's really what they're exploring, this romantic idea of the wolf being the wild side that you want to be part of. He doesn't want to be afflicted by the werewolf curse, but it also does feel good to be a werewolf. You can contrast this with, say, Benicio del Toro's Wolfman, which was a couple years ago and was set in the 19th century and very much reflective of that, where you have he's locked up in a mental institution, and when he goes wild, the nature is chaotic and kills everything. They're killing peasants. The werewolf is a horrible thing, and you don't really want to be a werewolf. It's something that destroys society. So its reflection on the 19th century is one that's really kind of opposed to that unconstrained romantic vision and is really reflecting against it. Like, the werewolf is really something horrible, something to be avoided. And at the same time, the prime character, Anthony Hopkins, he is a werewolf and he has himself chained at night, but at the same time, he doesn't want to be. He wants to be free and wild and to kill at will. So the last little bits about werewolves, besides exploring all that. So if you're going to use a werewolf in a horror story, you have to think about what direction you're going to go. Is the werewolf, does it feel good to go as part of nature? Is there a conflict there between the natural world, and the more modernized, sterile world of safety? What kind of themes are you going to explore when you are going to write about werewolves? And at the same time, you also have to think about what the rule set is for werewolves. One of the things that's really common with werewolves is that you can't kill them by normal means. That makes them a really scary monster. Any monster that you can't just shoot dead, like a zombie, you can shoot it in the head and it dies. You have to hit it in a special spot. Shooting its body doesn't hurt it. It's not like a normal animal. But a werewolf, you have to shoot it with something special, silver bullets. That's the usual thing. Or you have to kill it with a silver sword or something like that. So you have to have this special, precious metal, which is hard to acquire in order to overcome this horrible, fantastical beast. And I kind of like rule sets like that. And I think it's kind of fun for characters to have to explore that, especially if they're unfamiliar with lycanthropy. Even though the audience now knows probably all the rule set, you can create your own rule set, like werewolves have to be killed not with silver, but with something else that's important, like, holy water. I don't know what you want to use there, but it's good to come up with some sort of rule set that's going to do that. I'll also say, by the way, there's always these movie scenes of them melting down their silver dollars and casting them into bullets and then shooting them out of their revolvers. That would actually be very dangerous. Silver is a very hard metal in its pure form and is really going to destroy your gun, possibly cause some explosion in a revolver, if you have it actually, correctly cast at the correct bullet diameter. However, I'll give you some advice in case you ever have to fight werewolves. You can buy 1-ounce slug molds for shotguns, for 12-gauge shotguns, and you can just heat up your silver dollars. You have to get them really hot, by the way. Silver doesn't have a very low melting point. I don't remember what it is off the top of my head. But you see them actually heat it up and pour it in. What they're actually heating up is lead. Lead looks very silvery when it's hot because it loses that oxidized layer. But you can heat up the silver and put it in a mold, load it in a shotgun shell. Shotgun shell has a smooth bore, and as long as that slug is smaller than the diameter, it's not going to blow out your barrel. The way that rifling in a barrel works is that you're forcing a lead bullet, which is soft, usually copper-jacketed lead, or if you're just shooting a lead wad cutter, it doesn't matter. And that lead gets squished by the rifling. It conforms and begins to twist as it is forced by that powerful gas down the rifled barrel, and that twisting causes the bullet to spin, which stabilizes it in the air. So you can get rifled slug molds or smooth bore, completely smooth slug molds, and you can shoot them in a shotgun, and that won't destroy your shotgun. And you're shooting an ounce of lead, and if the wolf doesn't die because of the silver, and it's going to die to normal weapons, a 1-ounce slug is going to do a pretty good job. 1-ounce slug is some serious firepower. That's why, if you're going to own one gun, 12-gauge shotgun's a really good one to pick. You can load it up with slugs, even silver slugs, to hunt werewolves. So that's what your character should do rather than loading up silver bullets in a revolver. Cast those 1-ounce slugs and go to town. Plus, you can get yourself a nice automatic shotgun. You're gonna be wrecking that werewolf in no time. So just thought I'd add that. There's also some great werewolf stories that have existed in a couple different capacities where people become werewolves. There's like a society of werewolves, like Cycle of the Werewolf. And that's always an interesting one to explore, but it loses the animalistic side. The idea that when you become a wolf, you lose all sense of society, all social bonds that make sense to humans, and you become part of the chaotic, dangerous nature that is always out there past society, ready to kill man. You can imagine a person in the 19th century leaving town and going through the forest. The forest is actually dangerous. It's full of wolves. It could have bears. There could be bandits in the forest. When you leave the comfort of society where we're grouped together and we're safe because we're together and we're in shelter and we have weapons and we go out into the wild world, it's dangerous. So the werewolf really represents that wild world. So, if you have a town full of werewolves that has a society of werewolves, and I've seen this in games probably more than anything. There's one in the original World of Warcraft where if you go to the town during the day, they're humans, and it's in a horde area, so most people don't know this, but you could go there as Alliance, and the humans are friendly, and you can even buy stuff from them. They're vendors. But as soon as night falls, they turn into werewolves and will kill you, which I thought was hilarious. I remember there's towns of werewolves in like Fire Emblem games. There was one in one of the Golden Sun games. You have these lycanthropes, like societies of lycanthropes. To me, that doesn't make a lot of sense in the context of the mythology. The whole point of the Berserker is that he goes berserk. He is uncontrollable and will kill anything and everyone. He's an uncontrollable werebear force. And that, to me, really is the heart of the horror of the werewolf, that it's chaos, that it's the chaos of nature that is really dangerous. And by the way, I've also seen other kinds of were animals in fiction. So I just finished reading one of the Icewind Dale books by R.A. Salvatore, and there's were rats. They turn into giant rats. Giant rats, still pretty scary. Is it fundamentally different than like giant wolves? Not that much. And they still have a social grouping. They're operating as cognitive beings, which to me, again, goes against the idea of the werewolf in general. You want the werewolf to represent something that is, if you're doing a horror, this is a fantasy book, so you could do whatever you want in fantasy, I guess. But if you want it to be something truly frightening, it has to represent that chaos out beyond society. You don't want to be the werewolf, and you don't want the werewolf to be around you. It's very dangerous and hard to kill. And so that's where you're really going to make it nice and horrific. So thanks so much for watching this Storycraft. Leave me your thoughts down below. What's some of your favorite werewolf fiction? There's so much I just can't get into all of it throughout time. And again, we have 2,000 plus years of history of werewolves in Europe, and all of that European tradition that goes with it. I know that there are going to be mythologies that are kind of like werewolves from other cultures as well, but I'm just mostly focusing on what we, our European traditions for that. But leave me your thoughts down below. What are some of your favorite werewolf movies? Maybe some of the old horror movies, or some of your favorite books that involve lycanthropy as well, or maybe even albums, right? There's a whole band called Powerwolf that I like. My son really likes to listen to some of their songs too, and they're quite a good power metal band. They have all kinds of songs about werewolves. I remember I'm trying to remember if it was their second or third album by Ulver. Ulver means wolves, by the way. And it was an album called Nattens Madrigal, which means night madrigal. And it was about a guy being converted to Satanism through lycanthropy. And that was like the story of the album. It's a weird black metal album where there's like hissing, horrible black metal, and then like these acoustic guitar parts in between. Kind of an interesting album if you've never heard it. Ulver always does interesting music. You can always pick up the newest Ulver album and go, I didn't expect to hear what was on this album. So anyway, leave me some of your thoughts down below. Favorite songs, movies, whatever. And I'll see you guys next time. Newest book is coming out next week. It's the sequel to this one, City of Silver. Make sure you're on the mailing list, dbspress.com/list. I'll probably send out a bunch of free copies of this over the weekend, so hop on it. And that way you can read this, and then you can read the new one, Tyrant's Gallow, when you are ready. Tyrant's Gallow is a little longer, more crazy stuff in it, hopefully. So I'll see you guys next time.